The other thing that was asked of me was to talk about baiting pigs, and I'll just talk a bit about the process, some principles that we use, and a couple of tips from a few of us, not just me. I've learned a lot of this from other people as well on how you might do it a little bit better or deal with some of those issues that come up. So 1080 baiting pigs, I prefer to use grain, and we'll talk about baiting materials in a minute, but the bulk of what I do is with grain. Grain is affordable and readily available. It's easily stored. You don't have to keep it cold like meat. Doesn't go off like vegetables, that sort of thing. 1080 baiting is easy, it's effective, and it's efficient. You can get up to 90, if you do the steps that we're going to talk about today, it offers really good population knockdown in the order of 95%. It's a well-established technique. As I said, it's been around since the 70s and it's pretty well understood. The non-target risks can be mitigated. We've got ways around those. It's not sexy, but it works. It really does work quite well. So how do we do it? Well, there's only a few steps really, but free feeding, so training the pigs on non-toxic bait, your ability to do that and your understanding of that directly affects the success of the program. If you don't have time to free feed, please go and do something else, because the pig control is not going to work. You're only going to get a small proportion of the population. You need to set aside time to free feed. If you can't free feed for 10 days, don't waste your time. Go and do something else. Set out a block of time to get this done. So free feed, generally free feed with what the pigs are used to eating. An exception to that might be, say, if we're doing pig work at Ballina and they're used to sugarcane. So we'd introduce the sugarcane as an example, chemi bananas, whatever you like, and then gradually get them on the grain. And once you get on the grain, they absolutely love it. So free feed what they're used to. If that's, say, at Moree, it might be that you use wheat because they're used to eating wheat. By and large, I think it's best to use simple, whole, clean grain. And these, again, just keep it as simple as it needs to be. Remember the scale that you need to work on to get to your 70%. So there's a few different things we can use there. You can use all different types of grain. Wheat's on the top left, chickpeas is top right, barley is bottom left behind the pellets, and sorghum is bottom right. Pellets are actually quite good, particularly if you've got a concern about the spread of weed seeds. Chickpeas they really love, but they can be a little bit hard. In general, it's the things that are less prickly in their mouth that they're going to go on to first or prefer. So they'll prefer wheat over barley, which is a little bit prickly, and they'll prefer barley over oats, which is really prickly, but they will eat it if they have to. So as a general rule, something that's a bit softer in the mouth is a bit better. So legally in New South Wales, you have to free feed for 3 nights, but I wouldn't just do it for 3 nights. I'd do at least 10. Sometimes it'll take longer if you've got a particular problem or if you're drawing pigs in from further out or the population's a bit spread out. Use clean, weevil-free grain that's been untreated. As I said, less prickly grain is preferred over, wheat over barley, barley over oats, that sort of thing. But they will eat grain. A lot of the places that we've been to, people will say, oh, look, it's different here. They won't eat grain here. If you persist, generally they will. If they won't, that's normally a timing issue or a seasonal issue where there's just so much food, it's like they build a Macca's right next door to where they're camping. They don't have to go anywhere to get a feed. That makes it more difficult, and we'll talk a bit about timing in a minute. If you're going to introduce grain and they're not used to it, just introduce it gradually. You'll get them. So baiting overview, this is for New South Wales baiting. It is a bit different in other states. So 1080 grain per kilo contains 450 milligrams of 1080, which is equivalent to 75 dog baits. There's a permit in Western New South Wales for 1080 meat baits, and that they contain 144 milligrams per kilo. So a dog bait's 6 milligrams per kilo. Like it's 1 kilo of pig bait is equivalent to 75 dog baits. So all I'm saying there is, yeah, look, it's necessarily toxic. We do need to make it quite toxic. We need to be careful with its use, but there are really good techniques to minimise the risks to other species. Just also be aware that some of the rates in other states are a bit different, and the allowed bait materials are a bit different as well. So it is a bit complicated. I can really only talk today about New South Wales because that's what I'm doing at the moment. So just some really basic principles that we talk about when we teach pig control classes. We talk about R is for removal of the disturbance. So your pig owners need to have a holiday for a while. You need to remove that. You need to create a positive association with your bait sites or your trap sites. It's really no different. So say to your pig owners, look, we appreciate what you do. Have a holiday for a little while. So R is for remove the disturbance. F is for feed. You need to free feed them and train them to come onto the site. The objective is to draw the maximum amount of pigs that you can from that area to your sites or sites. So put out good feed. As I said, be prepared to do it for 10 days. And something that I've borrowed from Darren Marshall is to create a buffet, not a snack. So you want to have a buffet. So good quality feed and lots of it. So F is for feed. P is for plateau or peak. So over that sort of 7 to 15 to 21 days, the amount of pigs that are coming to your sites will increase. So you need to check those sites daily. So check them in the morning and increase the rate of feed that you're putting there. So you might start out with 20 kilos at a site, but you might not reach a peak till you're at 100 kilos or 200 kilos. So treat at the point where the bait take per night levels out. That's when you've got all of the available pigs in that area at your site, and it can take quite a while. I think pigs are sort of loosely aggregated, so they'll come together at certain times when they're camping, but they're not like a mob of sheep. They don't all move around together. So they might go off feeding in different areas of a night. They'll come back over a couple of days in their bedding areas. They might come back to a certain spot, meet up, and their mates go, geez, I can smell something on you that's pretty good. I'm going to go back and see what you're eating tonight. So the bait take rate just goes up over time. And we see it plateau sort of 10, 15 days, somewhere in there. So wait for the peak before you treat them. That's the principle there. And T is to apply the controlled treatment, whether that's 1080, whether that's hogon, whether that's trapping. So those just again, remove the disturbance, create a positive experience at the control sites. Be the smoko van that's turning up with a good, donut or something. Don't chase them, don't harass them, just let them do their thing. Feed them and have plenty of good quality free feed. The 50% rule is if everything's gone when you turn up in the morning, increase the amount that you put out by 50%. Yep, so if you put 10 kilos there and it's all gone, put 15 out the next night. Peak, wait for the free feed, peak for the nightly free feed take to plateau, it's a mouthful. Treat and apply the control tool. Just a little bit about baiting timing. This is a photo from Hungerford, and we're actually producing meat baits for pigs there as part of a trial, and it was so dry. You can see in the background past Fred's shoulder there that there's a mob of pigs coming in while we were baiting. So that was quite critical. That was the start of that was 15, the start of the drought. And that was the only water for a long way around. And there were pigs heavily concentrated on that water point. There wasn't any feed out in the paddock, so the timing was perfect. So timing can be really important. What we say is look for the times of resource stress, and that'll be different depending on where you are. If you're in the north, it might be the end of the dry. If you're, I don't know, in the west, it might be, so if you're at Wanaring, it might be in January, February when the surface water's contracted and they're concentrated around water points. So there's no hard and fast rule, but look for the times of resource stress and then use your seasonal patterns to your advantage and the pig's disadvantage. For us here, so at Tamworth, Willow Tree, Corindi, cropping areas like that, we'll use the space between the cropping cycles when they're hungry. All right, so getting down to actually doing it bit, laying bait. So importantly, when you lay bait, is to put it out in a way that the dominant pigs can't bully the other ones away. So it's a bit like if people have fed horses, if you've got 3 horses, you put 4 biscuits of hay out so they walk around. So it's a bit like that with pigs. So put it out so everybody can get a go at it. Put it out in one big pile, one dominant pig's likely to stand there, eat much more than they need, but they're going to be toast, but the others might not get enough. So put it out. You can use a checkerboard pattern, you can use like a concentric circles, whatever you like. You'll see in this one where the pigs have started to come in and there's a couple of big dominant ones there and they're spread out having a feed. And then the other ones come in and everybody sort of gets a go. What you're aiming for is a little bit left over, and we'll talk about the 2/3 rule in a moment, but that's that same site we saw before with the checkerboard pattern. That's perfect. So just a tiny little bit to clean up. You don't need too much. The more that you put out, the more you got to clean up. So don't put too much out. is the trick there. Post baiting cleanup, you'll see this is a pig poisoned with meat baits as a part of a trial. I'll talk about the 2/3 rule in a moment, but they nearly always, particularly as young guys that come in early, they have really big full stomachs and they take more than they require. If you've got really heavily concentrated pigs, spread your sights out a little bit. If you're, I don't know, let's say Cape York, or if you're in Warrego or something and you've got 400 pigs coming to a dam site, then spread the control sites out around the dam. Don't have them all too close, because they'll just get on there and eat more than they need to. They'll eat more than they require. The 2/3 rule, what that refers to is if your plateau feed is say 100 kilos, put 2/3 of that out, because they'll start to feel sick and they won't eat the full amount that they will the night before. So if you put out, they're eating 100 kilos, put 60 out or 65 out. Otherwise, you've just got to clean it up. Most pigs leave the bait site after 2 to 3 hours. And generally, most of them you'll find within about 350 metres of a site. Something like that. That's the sort of area that we've found them in anyway. You do need to clean up. As an operator, you do need to have a look around. Now, you don't always have to clean up every carcass. It says where practicable. So if you're at Wanaring or at Hungerford and you're 40 k's from anywhere, it's not practical for you to clean up all of those carcasses. You don't necessarily have to. Whereas if you're somewhere that's more closely settled, say if you're baiting at Wollongong, then you will need a plan for those carcasses. The best thing to do is have a hole pre-dug and put them in and put them under 500 mils soil, and they'll break down quite naturally. Those carcasses that are in the paddock that you can't get to if you're baiting 400 pigs in one night, which happens, you can't pick up all of those. There is some risk with 1080, residual 1080 within the carcasses, but it's not there forever. So as the carcass decomposes, the rate of toxin in the pig actually falls quite quickly. It's probably highest in the stomach lining, then the brain and the liver. So it's not there forever. It decomposes drops as the decomposition starts. All right, so this is just to show you that they will eat lots and lots and lots, much more than they need to, and that's just some 1080 bait. You can see the blue dye in there, in that guy's stomach. So just a really quick chat about baiting with hogon. I haven't had a lot to do with it. I've used it a couple of times. It seems like a really good product. I think there's a lot of places where we're trapping now. If I was an operator working for LLS, there's occasions where I go, look, I'm not going to worry about trapping. We're just going to hogon. I think that's a really good outcome. Hogon is sodium nitrite, blocks oxygen pathways in the pigs. They seem to die closer to the bait site than they do with 1080. The matrix itself seems quite palatable. They do seem to really like it. The only thing I'd say, just from a use point of view, is it requires a couple of nights to teach pigs to open the box. So don't put the box out there the night before you're going to kill them with the hogon. Give them a couple of days to get used to it, to learn how to open it. They'll do that fine. They'll learn how to do it, but give them a couple of nights to become accustomed to it. It's an S6, so the availability is good, but it does have an additional cost. That's just a photo of the bait box, so they lift that up with their nose. So hogon's about $40 a kilo, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I suppose you just have to remember the scale that you might need to operate on. If you've got large numbers of pigs over a big area, it might be it's going to be a lot more economical just to go with 1080, which is about $3.50 a kilo, something like that. So just remember that if you're starting off. All right, some key points. It is a well-established technique. If it's not broken, I don't think we need to fix it too much. We've got some tips around minimising non-target takes. Free feed is really important. You do need to set aside the time to do that. And the two most common kind of failures that we get are not free feeding and disturbance at the free feed site. Use resource stress in your area to your advantage. Know your area, you know when they're going to be stressed for food, water or shelter. The local population is excellent, and as I said before, it's important to do the worst first. As always, it's best if repeated as much as you need to do it and combined with your neighbours as well. Just a few tips learning from my mistakes. In selecting your sites, always have a good look around. Don't just rely on somebody to say, look, this is where all the pigs are. Have a good look about yourself. It's really important to allow pigs to decide where they'd prefer to eat. And sometimes you can't do that. Sometimes that's not obvious. You go, look, it's going to work there. I know that'll be a really good site, and they'll just walk through the grain. If that happens, just put a few other sites out for that one group of pigs and let them decide where they want to do it. It might be that they've had, you know, where you think's the best site, they might have had a scare there, be frightened or something. I don't know what it is. Sometimes it's a bit strange. So as I said, put out more sites than you need and reduce them if you need to. Cameras are really handy on sites and we use them a lot, but you don't have to have them. And what I'm going to say is if you use them, go and have a look at the site and try and work out what's going on before you check the card. And that way your sign reading skills will improve over time. So minimising non-target risks, keep it simple. It's always good if you can use the existing fencing to exclude stock. You know, you might have like a dam square, a paddock where there's no stock, that sort of thing. Use that. You don't necessarily always have to put up a brand new kind of exclusion device. Hog mats and exclusion devices, the hog hoppers are good, but only use them if you have to, because they're just something else that the pigs need to get used to. Yeah, if you need to use them, but if not, just go with grain on the ground is fine. Put out the grain as close as you can for last light as possible to avoid birds being on it. And the other thing you do is if you free feed properly, the pigs will be there pretty soon after you put it out. Remember that 2/3 rule, don't put out too much. Free feeding helps to reduce the risks. If you've had pigs feeding there for 10, 14 days, they'll actually keep things away. They'll actively defend that free feed site. So that helps you as well. And as I said, allow 2 to 3 nights of training for pigs to become used to those exclusion devices. Don't put them out on the last night and expect pigs to use them straight away. This is nearly my last one. Just some things on free feeding. It's really common and easy to underestimate the numbers of pigs that you've got there and the grain that you might require or the free food you require. Put at least 20% of fat on your grain estimate when you're trying to work out how much you're going to need. Check your sites every day. Aim for 10% left over. Wait for signs that pigs are comfortable at your sites before you bait. So that's sort of laying down, feeding suckers at a site, something like that. Only introduce attractants if you really need them. Say after 4 or 5 nights and nothing's working, bring them in then. Don't make life too hard for yourself. It can be hard. The most common problem that I see with free feeding is bait site interference. So if you can, and if a landholder will let you, put a lock on a gate. Really helps sometimes, keep people out of there. Sometimes it won't, they'll cut it. But that's the most common thing that I see when people have got the best intentions and they're trying to free feed, the most common thing I see is bait site interference. Okay, so actual baiting, doing the putting out the toxic bait, always use the same grain for free feeding and baiting. Don't ever treat pickled seed grain, because when you wet it with the 1080 solution, quite often it'll give off an unpleasant taste. So they'll eat the free feed, won't eat the poison stuff. It's because it's pickled. Have a plan and conversation with your landholders about carcass disposal before you start. And always clean up and dispose of uneaten grain, bury any vomit that you find, because that'll have a reasonably high toxic load. So have a look around the bait sites after you've done your control work.